Claiming to be wise, they became fools. Romans 1:22, it goes on to say, and they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images of fish and reptiles and birds. You can see above me, one of the gentlemen, Billy Carson's, got one of the false gods in front of him. And I don't even want to say too much. I just want to play some clips from this debate, which happened in early November. It just got leaked. And now Billy Carson, who has a channel called Forbidden Knowledge, it's a channel that I started following years ago when I went down the rabbit hole of truth, of the evil in this world and the true machinations of power. And the stuff that he puts out can be very addicting if you start to have your eyes open to what's going on in this world as far as the stuff that's hiding in plain sight, but it's kind of the spiritual realm. He speaks a lot of truth. The problem is he tries to debunk Christianity and the truth of who Jesus is. So it's actually very diabolical. He's full of worldly wisdom. For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. That's one of his biggest things, that he says Jesus never died on the cross, that he never even was on the cross. He claims it's all made up. He claims to travel around the world and has all this knowledge of all these different gods and all these stories where the Bible stole from, but none of his stuff is verifiable. And in this, he claims to have been caught off guard. He claims to have been doing a favor to a friend. He thought it was just going to be a casual conversation. Now all of the excuses are coming out. Now he's filing lawsuits against his former friend who had him on his podcast, against Wes Huff, who is defendant number 2, against everybody else who has reposted any of this debate, which is now leaked in its totality of like over 2 hours. He himself went on to post a 3-hour rebuttal where he really continues to shoot himself in the foot, but it's only because he's so wise in his own eyes. So I just want to play some of these clips, and we'll start out with the first question being about Jesus being like dying on the cross and why he believes that, or at least why he pretends to believe and pushes the idea that Jesus never died on the cross, that he never even went to the cross, and how it's refuted from Wes Huff, a biblical scholar.
Billy, you talk about how Jesus was never crucified, which is interesting because my wife, who's a Muslim, they believe that as well. Mm-hmm. Their beliefs, from what I understand from her, are they don't think that Jesus, as they believe is a prophet, God would have him killed. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they have any historical evidence, as far as I know, as to what or how or why they believe that. I'm curious for you guys both, and if you want to, I guess, go first, Billy, as to how you came about like the findings where it seems that Jesus was not crucified, or that's not accurate.
Sure. And in my videos, and if you listen to the podcast, the statement is according to the Sinai Bible. Okay, according to the Sinai Bible, Jesus wasn't crucified in that Bible. That Bible predates the King James Version of the Bible. And the text there actually is about 12 to 14,000 differences between the Sinai Bible and the King James Version of the Bible, which came much later. And then also one of the things that were interesting is that they discovered the book of Jesus' wife, which is at the Harvard Seminary, which according to some scholars, that's a little controversial, but they claim that this is an accurate record that Jesus may have even been married, which then, adds more, if that's true, it adds more to the hypothesis that maybe he wasn't crucified. I just personally believe that Jesus was an amazing human being. I don't think that he was the Son of God in the sense that he's God, but that we're all gods. As he said, ye are gods, and that we're to do greater things than him. And I just personally believe that the return of the Christ is the return of the Christ consciousness. When we can all achieve a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, passion, understanding, empathy, love that he came to this planet with, and we get that in our mind and our conscience, and we can act on those incredible emotions and that understanding, that the whole world is going to transform instantaneously. And I think at the second coming is the coming of the Christ consciousness to the planet, not a human being flying back to Earth to save people. That's just my personal understanding of how I perceived it. over many, many years of going through this information and going through all this text.
And Wes, I'm gonna let you respond to that. And again, I mean, this is everyone listening to the show. You know, I'm always like, challenge everything. Learn to critically think and continue to come to your conclusions. Even with Jesus, I'm not personally even waiting on that he has to come back to say, I already know I'm, like I said, that strength of God and consciousness is already, I can tap into that right now. So you don't have to wait for him to come back. For those that believe he does, to actually have that like next level of what that's supposed to mean. But Wes, go ahead on for what Billy was talking about, I think with a book in the Harvard Museum, and I heard something about Jesus's wife, which that's, yeah.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I think it's really cool to not just be in the room proverbially with you, Billy, but be able to interact with you, because I wish I could be there in person. Unfortunately, Toronto, Canada is a long way away from Florida. It's a little bit of a jaunt, but I really appreciate the fact that you seem to have investigated to a certain degree some of these facts. Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
When you say the Sinai Bible, what are you referring to specifically?
It's the biblical text that was written. It made it into you can actually look it up on Amazon. It's a Bible called, I have a version at home. It's called the Sinai Bible, right, from Mount Sinai. I'm assuming that's the mountain that they're referencing there. But they put together their own version of the biblical text prior to the King James Version being put out.
Sure. So when you refer to the Sinai Bible, would you be referring to Codex Sinaiticus, like the codex that comes? Okay. That's why I was trying to get some clarification, because so you can actually go and see Codex Sinaiticus is at the British Library. So you can go and see it. It's on display. And the British Library has actually digitized the entire manuscript. So I work with manuscripts in my linguistic work. I'm an expert on early Christian scribal culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have a facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I ask for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325 and 350 AD. And its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring, when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there, I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say, Matthew 27, mm-hmm. where it has Jesus being crucified. And that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or, the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers or listeners or whatever be able to see that?
Right now to make sure I have the version that I'm looking at.
I'm just curious, like the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
Okay, yeah, well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with, there are 2 manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery. And so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have 2 copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are 2 apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, mm-hmm. but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular We know it's a forgery because it does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th century. Now that is, I would agree with you, Billy, our oldest copy of the Bible in the sense of cover to cover, Genesis to Revelation copy of the Bible.
Right.
The problem is that we have individual copies of all 4 Gospels going back hundreds of years before Codex Sinaiticus. So I have a facsimile behind me of P66. This is a late 2nd century copy of the Gospel of John. I work with this particular manuscript. I can just show the screen right here. This is an almost complete copy of the Gospel of John. And it has the crucifixion.
By any chance?
Yeah, so papyrus is just the what it's made out of. So
I got that from ChatGPT, by the way.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so
guys, I'm just
I can
to sound
actually.
smart for a second.
I have that papyrus at home.
Oh, that's
Yeah, so I'll show you this. So the documents you actually see on my bookshelf behind me are facsimile papyri that I've made. So when I was in Egypt last summer, I went and I got made for me some papyrus sheets. And so I take these papyrus sheets, which are made from the papyrus plant. And then when I go and I look at actual manuscripts, so I was at the University of Philadelphia last summer, and I went and I saw a document called P1, which is a 3rd century fragment of the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And so what I did is I sat down with that original and I produced a facsimile. So I copied the text. First of all, I cut it out with an X-Acto knife in not the original 3rd century one on my papyrus. I cut out with an X-Acto knife this guy, and then I copied the text transcriptionally on the front and the back. So papyrus is just simply, it's what it's made out of.
Yeah.
And so there's categorizing systems, and the standard one is called the Gregory Allende categorizing system. And so sometimes you'll see when manuscripts are mentioned, they'll have a GA and then a number behind it. If it's made of papyrus, you simply abbreviate the word papyrus to P, and then you have the numbering system. Mm-hmm. So P66, what I showed you earlier, that's this on the categorizing system. It's the 66th manuscript that was put into the system. It's from the Gospel of John. I also have, P46 and P47 on my shelf, which includes all 4 Gospels and Acts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So the only hesitation I have with what you said, Billy, is that we have single copies of the Gospels that can be dated to the 2nd century that all do have the crucifixion. And so if we're relying on something like the Gospel of Barnabas, which is not just like, it's not that there's debate about it, it's that it's a known forgery. I mean, no one's referring to the Gospel of Barnabas as anything other than...
If you say it's a known forgery, yes, but I'm going to go with that. Let's talk about the Old Testament a little bit and leading up into the New Testament.
Well, hold on, because do you mind if I address the Gospel of Jesus' wife?
You see, and this is a classic technique when you're outmatched, you're outwitted, you try to switch the topic. He was on podcast after podcast espousing this nonsense as though it were true and as though he was some enlightened one, empowering people to not believe in the Son of God, in Jesus. So he has this worldly knowledge, but he eliminates the hope of the gospel. It's truly heretical and it's truly dangerous. And that's why people like this need to be exposed.
Sure, go ahead.
What was her name?
Yeah,
I'm like trying to write notes like I know what I'm doing, but I'm just curious.
So the Gospel of Jesus' wife doesn't actually mention. So oftentimes what happens is that the text of the Gospel of Jesus' wife is kind of paralleled with the Gospel of Philip, which mentions that that Jesus would kiss Mary Magdalene on the mouth. And so those are kind of used in parallel to kind of for this argument that Jesus was married. So the Gospel of Jesus' wife is in the Harvard Library. However, the reason we know it's also not legitimate is because even though the manuscript, the papyrus that it's on, was carbon dated to the 4th century, the text was actually copied from a PDF version of the Gospel of Thomas known as Grandin's Interlinear. And there was a mistake in the Coptic text of Grandin's Interlinear that was copied into the Gospel of Jesus' wife. So we know that this is not a legitimate document, even though the papyrus is ancient, and this happens a lot with forgeries. I have a couple of friends who have actually worked on projects that have revealed forgeries within Dead Sea Scroll manuscripts and within other ancient Christian papyri. But the reason why we know the Gospel of Jesus' wife, and that Karen King, who kind of vouched for it and she lost a lot of credibility, unfortunately, for her, and she's admitted that it's a fake as well, was because we can tie it directly to not copying from an ancient text, but actually copying from an online version of the Gospel of Thomas in a PDF form. And the mistake on that PDF form was copied into the text that was borrowed in the phraseology of Jesus' wife. So I just point that out is, once again, with our sourcing, I think we need to make sure that we're going towards not just early sources, but actually credible sources. And unfortunately, neither the Gospel of Barnabas nor the Gospel of Jesus' wife are credible sources in terms of actually, and agreed upon by not just the vast majority of scholarship, but I don't know anybody in the field of papyrology, paleography, historiography, who actually refers to these documents as being legitimate.
That's fair enough. I can respect that. So let's go into the Old Testament a little bit.
And that's how you dismantle a heretic. And you do it kindly and with grace. And even if you do that, you will still get attacked, like Billy is attacking right now, because he got made a fool of. He got exposed for being the fool that he is. 1 Corinthians 1:20, where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has God not made foolish the wisdom of this world? Yes, he has. But you have people like that who are empowered by people who control the platforms, the major platforms in this world, to continue spewing nonsense that will draw people away from the truth of Jesus Christ and the hope that is there within, and to all of the other evils of this world that only inspire anxiety, hopelessness, depression, all of these other things. He exposes truth, but not hope with truth. So go ahead and look it up more for yourselves. I highly encourage you. I'm following Wes Huff. He's got a lot more followers now. Definitely recommended. So I hope this finds you well. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.